Hi, welcome to AusBizAsia. I'm Sarah Clark. Coming up, we talk to the small business owners from Hong Kong who are thriving thanks to having extra help at home. And the former CEO of BHP Billiton in China discusses the yin and yang of negotiating with the second largest economy in the world.
China's a fact of life. It's going to be here for a long time. The impact on us is still very big and very profound. And I think we need to move the conversation from that short-term sort of squabbling over the spoils one to a longer-term one, that our world has fundamentally changed.
And the Australian woman creating award-winning designs for the big international luxury brands and bringing manufacturing to China. The drive to recruit more women to senior roles globally is a well-known one. And while the number of female chief executives is growing, progress is still slow. The latest McKinsey report indicates that women are still underrepresented at board levels and more so in executive roles. So how does Asia compare to the rest of the world? And in particular, how are Australian women placed in this market compared to home? Well, a recent Australian survey indicates that living and working in Asia is the key to getting ahead.
There is a lot of opportunity for women in Asia, and I think that's a product of the economic growth that we're seeing out here.
She spent most of her career in IT and the last 16 years working in the United States and Hong Kong. As a senior director at global technology corporate Symantec, Heidi Badgery knows where the future growth opportunities lie.
In a couple of years, Asia will account for 35% of the world's economy. And for multinationals, non-Asia-based multinationals, the percentage revenue contribution to the company from Asia is increasing by a couple of percentage points every year. And that's just revenue.
Heidi Badgery has held several global and regional portfolios at Symantec. She's also led the program overseeing 22 of the company's largest global accounts, which helped double the year-on-year revenue growth. She believes women are playing a significant role in the economic rise across the region.
I do think there's a lot more opportunity in Asia, and I think the opportunity for growth and to have Western experience, which many Australians do, obviously Western business experience, and being able to combine that with Asian experience makes you very employable in Asia. I think Australians in general have a great opportunity.
Heidi's thoughts are reflected in a recent study by UGM in partnership with the group Women on Boards that specifically looked at Australian women and the Asian century. It found they're thriving in leadership roles in this region with greater representation in the workplace. The survey also found there was less gender bias here compared to Australia.
I've not personally experienced gender as an issue. It's the value of experience is much more valued here. And I do think that we experience a greater degree of tolerance than maybe Asian women do, particularly in some markets, that Western women are given certain allowances which make it easier for us to get to senior roles. And I think that is a product of we've come up in the ranks in another region. So experience is valued here, is respected in Asia, more than gender is an issue.
I don't think Asia's necessarily cracked the women problem, so to speak. But if you look at, there's a lot more family companies and things like that, so you have a lot more women, certainly in Chinese companies in very senior positions.
Like Heidi Badgery, Kimberly Cole lives in Hong Kong and is also in a senior role. She's worked for Thomson Reuters for 23 years and now oversees 100 employees and is on the regional leadership team.
I think the big advantage being in Asia is access to affordable help. That makes a huge difference. Just on, being in a senior role, there is a lot of things that you can't plan, or there are things that happen that you need to respond to. I think also being in a global organisation, there are calls that you have to have late at night, etc. So the ability to have help means that you can sort of balance that need to perform in the office, but then when you're at home, you can focus on quality time with the children, with your husband, etc., rather than having to put on a load of washing, go and do some supermarket shopping.
Employing a foreign domestic worker in Hong Kong is common amongst expats. The minimum monthly wage for a live-in helper is around 600 Australian dollars. For working mothers like Heidi Badgery and Kimberly Cole, it makes childcare affordable and allows them to do the long hours and travel.
I'm on the road a lot. A lot of people think I'm never here, especially often my children. Probably travelling about at least, I'm going to the core centres every quarter. So Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney and Tokyo being the sort of primary hubs that we have people in. But then you've got Indonesia, Vietnam, Taiwan, Korea as well. So I'm probably on the road for about 100 days a year.
It makes a significant difference having help in the home. Help in the home is available in Australia, but it's much harder to organise. It's much more expensive and it's much more complex.
The availability and affordability of childcare in Asian countries is highlighted in the UGM report as a practical reason for women's success in this region, and a point not lost on the majority of women going back to work 3 months after giving birth.
It's much more socially acceptable for women to stay working after they have children. There are a lot of different sort of support networks from the broader family around balancing the whole kind of work-life balance issue around having children.
I think there's just more opportunity in general in Asia, partly because of the freedom you can have. If you're a mother, a working mother in Australia, of course you're going to be restricted by your children's activities and school activities, etc. But in Asia, of course, you've got a lot more help, which allows you to be a good mother at the same time as, fulfilling your career opportunities as well. And, I see an awful lot of expatriates here setting up their own businesses, taking risks perhaps they wouldn't have taken, had they been at home.
While there's a growing trend towards diversifying company leadership teams, it's well known that some firmly entrenched barriers still hinder progress. For these two working mothers, both believe work-life balance can be achieved, but with trade-offs.
I've always believed in the you can have it all scenario, even though I know that's kind of a now controversial area. And the all is, I've never thought that I couldn't have a career and a family. I've always thought that having both was possible and that it shouldn't be a choice. Of course there's trade-offs and there is a balance to be struck. Therefore having the affordable help makes a huge difference.
As for living in Asia, Heidi Badgery says it's helped her successfully climb the career ladder. But she believes being an Australian has also played a part.
Well, I think there's still so much to do in Asia. It changes so rapidly. The dynamic shift between the markets, China and India, and being in Hong Kong is a great experience to see that and learn from it. But I also think being Australian is a competitive advantage professionally. I'd love to give that to my children. So I've been away from Australia for 16 years now, and I do think it still is the best place to live in the world.
He's widely respected as one of the most knowledgeable businessmen on the question of China's raw materials future. And after more than 3 decades in the region, Clinton Dines is an expert on the yin and yang of negotiating with the world's second largest economy. The former CEO of BHP Billiton in China says the growth story is far from over and Australia needs to avoid complacency to keep up. I spoke with him on a recent trip to Shanghai. Clinton Dines, thanks very much for joining the program. Now, you've been in China for around 35 years and almost half of that as the head of BHP Billiton in China. How have you seen it change economically?
Well, economically, phenomenal. Obviously, it's, everyone can look out the window, everyone who comes and visits goes, wow. There's a big wow factor on it. And the way it was when I first arrived was, it was really like landing on Mars. It was very remote, very, very different, and the dynamics are very different. But economically, obviously massive expansion, infrastructurally, physically, it's all come a huge way, and obviously commercially, but more importantly, in terms of living standards. The way people are and what people have and how they can live their lives has changed phenomenally.
Do you think countries like Australia get it wrong in the way we view China?
I don't know if you can necessarily say there's rights or wrongs. In the popular political conversation in Australia, the popular media conversation, we're always sort of point scoring and saying you're right or you're wrong. And among sinologists, of course, we all like to think that we're the one who has the greater insight and all that kind of stuff. I think the more important thing is that we're constantly aware of how important this place to us, and we're constantly putting the requisite amount of effort into our comprehension of what's going on. We appreciate the dynamism of it. So one of the challenges that we have in China is it's really very big and terribly important. And therefore it requires priority, and it requires a great deal of attention and effort in order to have a profound and rigorous comprehension of it. And I think a lot of the commentary that we see around China is a result of the fact that China has come upon us very suddenly and very large recently. So we're all scrambling for an explanation for this, and we're all scrambling to say it's really big, it's suddenly there, it's really important, it seems to matter, and we're scrambling for explanations as to how to digest all that. But by and large, a lot of the commentary is not profound, and it's not terribly rigorous. It's extrapolation from single data points. So I guess the important thing is to be patient, to do your homework, to try to get that understanding, and to try to be generally rigorous, fact-based about the way one comments.
I was going to say, what is your one bit of advice for a company looking to set up in China?
That would be one of them. That would be do your own homework. Don't necessarily take anyone else's view for it. You've got to do your own homework. You've got to validate the data that you collect, and you've got to analyse it well, rigorously, and draw out the insights so that you can act. Sometimes that takes a bit of patience. It takes a bit of time, takes a bit of effort, takes some resourcing, but then again the opportunity is so large it's usually worth the effort. Just jumping in on the basis of relatively slim facts or relatively trite insight is axiomatically dangerous.
I've read that you previously stated that Australia is a fat and happy, complacent culture that could become lazy and unprepared for when the worm turns. Do you still think that's the case?
Well, I think there are certainly risks for Australia in the fact that for the last decade China has bought a lot of stuff from us at nice high prices, and we haven't really had to work that hard to make it happen. And that's given us strong economic growth, lots of investment in Australia, lots of very, very favourable terms of trade. And then what's happened within Australia is that we've kind of ridden that wave along without being too reflective about what was happening, why it was happening, and what might happen as it eased at the other end. And now we're coming into that. So if you have a look at, I think my view, during the boom, the conversation in Australia tended to be not so much reflective as a bit of a squabble about sharing the spoils. Now we're at the end of it, where the spoils are starting to not flow as readily as they used to flow. There's a little bit of a change in dynamic, and now there's quite a vigorous conversation about who should take more of a cut on the spoils. And if you think about it, that's not the world's most mature conversation. Whereas I think China's a fact of life. It's going to be here for a long time. The impact on us is still very big and very profound. And I think we need to move the conversation from that short-term sort of squabbling over the spoils one to a longer-term one, that our world has fundamentally changed. We might not like it. The face on the change is an Asian face. It's a Chinese face now, and that creates some anxiety, which tends to create a little bit of ostrich head in the sand stuff. It's just too hard to think about, so we will try not to. But the way our world works has changed, and we kind of have to come to terms with that. And like I say, come to terms with it in a national narrative that is a bit more profound and a bit more fact-based than probably the one that's happening now.
Back to you on a personal note, 35 years in China. Do you ever see yourself going back to Australia?
35 years, I've nearly done my quota, and we'll go back. I mean, we're driven as a family by our family considerations. A couple of kids back in Australia now and thinking about it, and also we'll maintain our family connections with China and the things we love about being here and we've enjoyed for both my wife and I, all of our adult lives here. You don't just sort of go, let's go home and leave. You'll always be connected and stay involved. But by the same token, life is the way it is, and you make transitions, and the priorities are family, so we'll start making transitions.
Clinton Dines, thanks very much for joining the program.
Thanks, Sarah.
There's a lot to be said about working in a place where you can get affordable childcare and domestic help. For one Australian couple, they've been able to achieve far more than they could had they been in Australia. Kylie and Daryl Platt not only run their own small businesses in Hong Kong, they each have another separate full-time job. And to top it off, they're parents as well. I caught up with them to find out their trade secret. Kylie and Daryl Platt, thanks very much for joining the program. Now, you're a husband and wife team, you're both running small businesses. Daryl, you're also a pilot, and Kylie has her own children's clothing line. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, for me it's passion. I find it's not work, it's not a job when I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. But I think we have to be very organised. We've got 3 children. And
having 2 domestic helpers definitely helps there.
Yeah, having 2 helpers at home, and so it means I can just walk out the door and go to work, and then come home when the children are at home. But yeah, I think at the end of the day for me, it's enjoying what I'm doing, so it's not work.
Daryl, how do you fly as well as run a small business?
Well, I still do the purchasing side of it, but my staff handle all the day-to-days, putting the orders together, and making sure they're all paid, etc.
And why did you start My Wine Man?
Started basically because the wine tax in Hong Kong in 2007, I think it was, went from 80 to 40 and then a year later down to 0. And the Australian dollar dropped, fortunately, at the same time, down to about 5 to 1. Yet the price that everyone else, all the stores were still selling at was probably double to triple what the price was now, the equivalent of in Australia. So I approached them and said, is the price going to change? And they said, well, no, we're making good money and we're pretty happy with that. So I've started sourcing wine from Australia and bringing it in and selling it to my friends, and obviously for our own consumption. And all my friends kept saying, you've got to make a business out of this. It's just unbelievable prices. You're half or less the price. So one night I just sat down and went, well, if I put a few dollars on it, and the turnovers, sell quite a few bottles here and there, well then it actually could be quite a good business in it.
How competitive was it when you first started?
It wasn't. It was very easy. It's become a lot more competitive now. More people have realised that there is a way to make money here against the big guys.
And Kylie, how hard was it starting a business like yours in homeware in a place like Hong Kong?
Yeah, we started 3 years ago, and at the time there weren't that many stores like Mirth around. But since then there have been some more opening. But again, I think what keeps us going and what helps us is that we're in a big space, and it's very unusual in Hong Kong to have a mix of brands from all over in a large space. So it's become a destination. I know we're not in Central, but we're in an area where people actually make the effort to come because they know they can spend some time here and look around. So yes, initially hard and a challenge, but it's paid off. So,
were there any risks of setting up?
Yes, yeah, I think there's always risks. It was a bit of a gamble to start with because we did choose an area that's very industrial. We chose an area that's very large, so we had to fill that with stock. There's a lot of risks, but I think we've managed to overcome them. We don't have a very big advertising budget, and we never have, so we've had to rely on word of mouth, we've had to rely on social media, so we've had to rely on different ways of trying to get the word out there.
When you started your children's clothing line, was there a strategy behind that, given your location?
Not really. I've always been creative, and it was something that being in Hong Kong allowed me to be close to manufacturers. I can get my samples back in 24 hours. In Australia, I wouldn't be able to do that. It was just something that I started off very gradually, just to test the waters, more for me to be creative. And as time's gone on, it's grown, and I've gone to different trade shows, mainly in Australia, but some in London and New York. But the ones in Australia are the ones that I found have really taken off to become, quite a favourite brand for some people in Australia. So.
Looking at how busy you both are, could you have done this if you were living in Australia?
Absolutely not.
No. I mean, it's, as I was saying before, it allows me to, when I am home, to be with my children and not have to worry about cooking dinner, not having to worry about doing everything else. I can focus on, once the children are home from school, I can go home, be with my children. I often say when I go to trade shows in Australia to the other people I've met there, how do you do it? How do you do what you're doing? Because I know I couldn't do it.
What advice would you give to anyone else who's considering moving to a place like Hong Kong and starting a business?
Don't be daunted. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Find something that's expensive in Hong Kong, which a lot of Hong Kong is expensive, and once you've done that, find a way to bring it in cheaper, and there's your market.
Yeah, I think in my case, start slowly as well. Know your market, know who you're trying to sell to, and then build it up from there. And sometimes, I mean, as in my case, I've found different directions as I've gone along. So you might start off doing one thing, and then you quickly realise what it is, what the market's like, and how you can change. So yeah, I think start slowly, but be prepared to change direction if you need to.
Or in Merce's case, just bring in stuff that no one else in Hong Kong has.
Yeah, and different things. Yeah.
And from a business perspective, what does the future hold for both of you?
I don't know. Well, I mean, we're here for a long time. Yeah. We're here. This is our home. Business-wise, we would like to expand. I mean, I'd like to expand Mirth. I've got distributorship for a couple of brands as well, so I'd like to expand that. And being in Hong Kong enables us to do that. I can't imagine doing that in Australia. So, yeah, we're here for, and I think with you as well, the same, trying to expand more stores. Watch this space.
Yeah, expand the range for me primarily, and just ensure that I keep bringing the best quality at the best prices I can, and focusing on giving great deals to the customer.
Kylie and Daryl Platt, thanks very much for joining the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
High-end fashion is big business across Asia, with luxury brands competing to grow their share of the market. Crucial to that branding is designing and creating a label's retail display. Australian woman Susie Heffernan has worked hard to make herself a key player in the market, and her award-winning company is now creating distinctive pieces that are helping the high-end luxury brands stand out. Creating life-size mannequins is a hands-on business. Starting from scratch, each sculpture is designed individually and tailored to meet a client's specific brief.
We've manufactured retail displays, mannequins, props, animals that might go inside a window display, carpets, rugs, anything that goes inside the shop.
Susie Heffernan is the creative mind behind this business. From modest beginnings in a studio in downtown Shanghai, her company Suzar now fills a large factory in the industrial district on the outskirts of the city.
I basically started with the first order, and then I grew the business organically from each order to each order, and it's in some ways not having any kind of investment or any investment partner has meant that we've been really able to put in place processes and procedures and a healthy organisation without having to answer to an investor.
She studied visual merchandising at RMIT in Australia, then went on to graduate from an economics and marketing degree from Deakin University. But her fascination with China took Susie to Beijing, and almost 25 years later, she now calls Shanghai home.
When I was growing up, my grandmother always had Chinese students renting rooms in her house. So for me, I knew about China and I knew about Chinese New Year since I can remember. It was always like my second Christmas. So the fascination from China really came from that time, and I wanted to learn Chinese. I think at that time it wasn't very common. I wanted to have a second language, and for me that seemed like a challenge. It seemed like an edge. Nobody else was doing it.
Securing a Chinese language scholarship at the prestigious Beijing University set her up, and she's now fluent in Mandarin and believes that's helped her navigate around the often convoluted process of doing business in China.
Yeah, I think it's also about when you understand a language, you understand the culture. And I've always sat in the middle of my office. I feel that as a leader of an organisation, you really need to know what's going on, and language is a big part of understanding the culture.
But it's helped your business?
Absolutely. Because for me, I can speak with suppliers in Chinese and, or government authorities, and they're much more respectful of you if you can communicate to them in their own language.
Her language skills, combined with her creative and economic background, has helped Susie grow her company into a global business in 10 years. When she set up, high-end retail accessories were being manufactured in Europe and the United States. So she decided to produce them in China, and now supplies some of the world's most prestigious fashion houses, like Marni and Louis Vuitton, plus the big department stores including Harrods, Lane Crawford and Daimaru.
We work with a lot of luxury fashion brands. One of the reasons that they like to work with us in China is because we're very discreet, very confidential, and we've maintained their confidentiality. That's easy to see because the fashion brands that or the lifestyle brands that we've worked with, you can't see their products copied anywhere else in the China market, and that's one way to tell that we've really maintained their confidentiality.
Tell me about manufacturing in China. Is it cheaper? How do you do?
It's not cheaper anymore, especially labour costs around Shanghai and the regions around Shanghai. But I think for us, we've moved on from that labour-intensive manufacturing, and we're going much further ahead than our Chinese competitors, who are still, on the labour-intensive manufacturing side. And that's people, I think, who will be able to succeed and continue in this in China, because manufacturing traditionally was cheap, but it isn't anymore.
And Suzhou hasn't had to do much digital marketing, as nearly all of the business has been through word of mouth. In 1 year, she designed displays for 50 stores from one brand in more than 60 cities, including Istanbul, New York, Milan, Moscow, Tokyo, Seoul and Hong Kong.
I think there is some reason is also this field special. They always change their windows bi-yearly. So that's why even we provide quite good quality mannequin or display, but next year they will still coming back to us for the new windows arrangement.
Summer Wang has been with the company from the beginning. She started as a receptionist, but has grown with Suzhou and is now the operations manager working closely with Susie.
Both of us is quite a mixture culture. Susie almost has been half Shanghainese and half Australian, and I start my high school is in an Australian boarding school, so it's so strange sometimes. We go to Chinese language called 缘分. We are both mixture culture, and we meet together, and we just suddenly feel we are matched.
And it's a business and cultural partnership that's clearly working. Suzhou has won awards in Australia and China and is now expanding the market with a consumer line. After 10 years of hard work, Susie Heffernan is now the manufacturer of choice for the international luxury brands seeking high-end accessories to stand out.
Yeah, let's not kid ourselves. If I'd had a crystal ball 10 years ago and known ahead of me the fires that I have to put out without water, the mountains that I'd have to climb without shoes, and the wars I'd have to fight without guns, I don't think I'd be here today.
I hope you enjoyed the program. Tune in next week to see more stories about Australians doing business in Asia.